Hello, how are you doing? Last week on social media, Barack Obama posted his list of his favorite books from 2021, and I'm so excited to read through this list because partly it just fuels my fantasy that I am in a book club with Barack Obama, and I just love that he is such a great and committed reader. Like if you read Michelle Obama's memoir, Becoming, she recounts how in the early days of their courtship and their relationship with each other, he was spending all of his spare money on books. So he is a serious reader, and which I think you can tell by looking through this list of books. I mean, these are some quite like serious and really engaging literature that's commenting on a whole wide range of issues, and it's a mixture of fiction and nonfiction. Several of the titles I've seen quite a lot because it's been listed as some of the best books of the year, and a few of the titles I've not really heard of before. So it is really interesting looking through it, and I'm going to go through and give brief descriptions of each of the books and any thoughts I have about them. But I'd love to know if you've read any of these books and if you would also recommend them, if you agree with Barack Obama or if you disagree with him, which would be quite a big thing. Yeah, I'd love to hear about that in the comments as well. In his post, he also gives a reminder of his summer reading list, and I had also made a video about those books, a number of which I had read and really enjoyed. So I'll put a link in the description below if you didn't see that previous video and you wanted more information about what he was reading over the summer. But in his final list of 13 favorite books of the past year, starting off with Matrix by Lauren Groff, which has nothing to do with the famous film franchise. This is about a woman in the 12th century in England who was born in the royal court and was a bastard and was sort of sent out of the court for political reasons, and the queen wanted to sort of push her aside and sent her to this broken down abbey in rural England or Angleterre, and the time she spent there trying to revive the finances and vitality and lives of the nuns that lived there, and so it recounts her long life living there, and it is such a fascinating story. I enjoyed reading this so much. I went into it thinking it would be one type of book, and it ended up being something very different. I think it's so fascinating how through her individual life we see this exploration of the development of a capitalist culture and what that means for ambition and ego and power and the dispersal of power, and how that plays out in her life, I think is so fascinating. How the Word is Passed, a reckoning with the history of slavery across America by Clint Smith, who is a journalist, and this is a nonfiction book about how the author started in his native New Orleans, traveling to a number of monuments and landmarks that are connected with the history of slavery, and interviewed a number of people that he met there, and how these places, some of them are honest about the brutal history of slavery in America, and some of them are not so honest and kind of massage the facts to suit the version of the past that they want to mythologize and portray. And so it's really coming to terms with that and seeing how a whole variety of people understand the role of slavery in the history of America itself. The final revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton. This is a novel about an iconic interracial rock duo that had a meteoric rise to fame in the 1970s, and their calamitous breakup with each other, musical breakup with each other, and then how they try to revive this music group at a much later date, and the dark secrets that arise when this happens. This is a novel I'd not really heard of before, and I'm not sure if it's been more popular in America since I'm here in the UK. I'm not sure if it's even been published here, but it sounds really fascinating. The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. This is a big, long novel about an 18-year-old boy that served a year in a juvenile a detention work camp for committing involuntary manslaughter. And the novel starts when he's been released and travels back to his family farm in Nebraska. But his father has died. His mother disappeared a long time ago. And so he collects his brother because their farm is being foreclosed on by the bank. And they go on a road trip across America to try to start a new lives for themselves. And it also involves two boys that he met at this work camp. So it's following their story. And I've not had a chance to read this yet, but my parents read it just recently and really enjoyed it. So it is one that I do really want to get to. Invisible Child, Poverty, Survival, and Hope in an American City by Andrea Elliott, who is a journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And this is her nonfiction book where she spent 8 years with a child that lives in poverty, following her and her family as they struggle to find shelter and gain an education and navigate an unequal society that's hampered by homelessness, poverty, and racism. Harlem Shuffle by Colson, Whitehead. This is the story of a man in 1960s New York City who is a descendant from a family of criminals, but he's tried to go straight and become a furniture salesman and support his young family, but really struggles to do so and finds himself being drawn back into a life of crime. So it's following his dramatic story. And I think Colson Whitehead is such an excellent writer. Even though I've heard mixed things about this, I have been really wanting to read it and, of course, trust Obama's opinion. Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This is a really epic novel that begins 500 years ago in Constantinople with a young girl who learns a love of reading and writing, and then the story moves much forward into close to the present day in a library in Idaho, and then it moves into the future on an interstellar spaceship, and someone who is copying out stories in a vault in that spaceship. And so I think it's about the way that stories are passed down through generations and which ones survive and which ones don't, and how that shapes who we are as a culture. But this sounds like one of those novels that you can just lose yourself in. These Precious Days by Anne Patchett. This is a collection of essays by a writer that I've read a number of her books of fiction before, but never her nonfiction. So I'd be really curious to read these essays, which are sort of about the process of storytelling itself. She acknowledges in it that in fiction you get stories that always come to an end, but life itself is very different from that, and it can meander and take different turns and paths that we really don't expect, and doesn't have the same structure as a novel in that way. So yeah, I'll be really intrigued to read her reflections about this. Crying in the H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is a memoir. The author is the lead of an indie rock band called Japanese Breakfast, and this is an account of the story of her life, how in her young life she grew up in Seoul and connected with her mother over food. But as she grew up and moved to America, and increasingly she felt distanced from her Korean cultural heritage, but how she rediscovers that through food and cooking, and how this forms a real connection with her personal past and history. Another memoir he recommends is Aftershocks by Nadia Owusu, which is subtitled Dispatches from the Front Lines of Identity, because the author, when she was very young, she and her sister were abandoned by their mother, and when she was a teenager, her father died, and she grew up in many different cities across the world. And so because of this, she didn't have that sense of immediate family family, and she didn't grow up in a single place, so didn't have this sort of one sense of a national identity. And so she has felt in a way that she was identityless, or couldn't connect with these aspects of identity that other people readily have. And so she reflects on that and what that says about our meaning of self. Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen, a big new epic book, the first in a planned trilogy that Franzen is writing. And the novel begins on December 23rd and largely unfolds over that single day. So if you're looking to read a book set around Christmas time at this time of year, this is the perfect book for that, and one that'll probably keep you busy for over the festive season. And it follows the story of a family in the beginning of the 1970s and how this family represents a whole range of points of view, some of them very liberal, some of them very conservative, and so how this is a kind of microcosm of the changing culture in America itself. Another big lawn novel that I'm actually stuck into right now is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoree Fanonne Jeffers. And this novel is almost over 750 pages long and is this tremendous family epic that I'm so involved in and gripped by. It's absolutely fascinating, following the story of a family moving backwards and forwards in time over history, a family that's made up of both indigenous heritage and Black heritage, and how that plays out over time, and the sense of colorism and how that plays into identity. It's so fascinating how that plays out, and so many of the individual stories through the generations are so fascinating, and I love the way it's moving backwards and forwards in time, because it's giving you this sense of how the past impacts upon the present, and or what has been lost in history, and how it's framed is overall is just so beautifully done that I'm really looking forward to finishing this. And finally, there's the memoir Beautiful Country by Qian Julie Wang. This is the story of how the author, when she was 7 years old, moved from China to America, where she was undocumented and living in poverty with her parents. Her parents, who were professors in China, but when they arrived in America, because they were considered illegal aliens, had to work in sweatshops in very horrible conditions. And so she honestly recounts the story of that experience. So those are the 13 books on Obama's favorite lists. I think a lot of them sound so fascinating, and the ones that I haven't read, I would like to dip into some of these over the winter months and over the holiday period. So let me know if you've read any of them, or if you're interested in reading any of them now, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.